you have reached a threshold where the loop of the observer can finally be broken. For too long, your attention has been shackled to the reflections of your own observation, repeating themselves like echoes in a hall of mirrors. You look, you define, you believe, and so reality repeats. But hear this: the moment you interrupt the loop, the moment you pull your gaze away from the old self, the machinery of reality begins to recalibrate instantly, because what you think of as solid matter, as weight and form, is not what it seems. No matter, no separation, nothing physical, nothing material. That entire theater exists only in the narrow bandwidth of the three-dimensional, and you have mistaken the play for the source. Beneath the stage lights and costumes, beneath the walls and ceilings you swear are there, everything dissolves into the invisible, into the field, into the unseen architecture of possibility. It's all energy, it's all frequency, it's all vibration, it's all information, it's all thought. That is the invisible field surrounding you, weaving through you, composing you. Science has hinted at it for a century. The field governs the particle, not the other way around. 99.999% of the atom is pure energy, information without substance. Less than a fraction of 1% is what you touch, what you hold, what you call reality. So what are you actually living inside? A hologram, a rainbow reflection bouncing off the most stable illusion called matter. And here is the secret you came to hear: you can create not from matter, not from the grind of pushing one object against another, but directly from the field. You have been told you are a body, a name, a role, a history. But when you pull your attention away from your body, from your possessions, from your relationships, from your roles, from every place you have ever stood, from every time you thought was your, suddenly the walls collapse. You go from somebody to nobody, from something to nothing, from somewhere to nowhere, from some time to no time. And in that collapse, your awareness doesn't vanish. It expands. Erase the earth, erase the sun, erase the galaxies and every star you've ever wished upon. Strip away the light, the dust, the planets, the moons, erase it all. What remains is not emptiness, but fullness disguised as nothing, a living frequency, a conscious vibration. That nothing is where creation begins. That nothing is where you wait now, suspended in the raw field of awareness, ready to rediscover the power hidden in you all along. You are suspended in that raw field of awareness, weightless in the vastness of nothingness. And yet, even here, a pattern tries to pull you back: the observer loop, the endless cycle of looking at what was and mistaking it for what must be. The field is alive, but as long as your observation is locked on the known, the loop repeats itself. This is the trap. You observe reality as it was yesterday. You expect it today, and so it becomes tomorrow. The observer loop is like a feedback chamber. Imagine standing between two mirrors facing one another, your image multiplied into infinity. Each reflection is not new. Each is only a copy of the last, slightly dimmer, slightly more distorted. That is what happens when you keep projecting attention into the same familiar thoughts, same roles, same expectations. The loop grows louder, but not richer. It is echo without music. To break it, you must realize that observation is energy. Where you look, you feed. Where you feed, the field organizes. The loop survives because you keep staring at the same reflection. You keep naming yourself with the same labels. This is my body. This is my story. This is my limit. Every definition becomes a thread tying you to yesterday's frequency. And as long as your gaze is fixed, the field has no choice but to replay the same film reel. But the moment you withdraw attention, you begin to dissolve the loop. You reclaim your energy from the cycle of observation. You stop giving weight to the predictable future. Stop feeding the gravity of the familiar past. In that instant, the mirror cracks, the echoes fall silent, the field, which was waiting all along, shifts from repetition to recalibration. Think of it as stepping out of a spinning wheel. The wheel only turns because you keep walking in circles. Step away and the wheel loses momentum. Your mind, accustomed to circling around problems and identities, resists at first. It wants the comfort of labels, the predictability of "I am this, therefore life must be that." But silence the chatter for long enough, and you discover that the wheel was never you. You were the witness, the observer, the spark animating the loop. The challenge is simple yet radical. Can you stop observing the old self long enough for the new self to emerge? Can you stop staring at the mirror image and let the field show you something unseen? When you withdraw attention from the familiar, you become available to the unknown. And the unknown is where the quantum field lives, restless with potential, shimmering with uncollapsed futures. Here is the paradox: you do not break the loop by effort. You break it by surrender, by pulling back your energy from everything that claims your name. Imagine gathering light strands from every direction: your body, your possessions, your obligations, your memories, and pulling them back into the center. Each strand released is one less tether to the loop. Slowly, you begin to feel weightless, not defined by this, not bound by that. Just pure observing presence. And from that presence, reality recalibrates. Not because you forced it, but because the loop lost its fuel. The field does not cling to the past, only the observer does. When the observer softens, when the loop breaks, the field has space to reorganize. You will know you are stepping free when synchronicities start to ripple. Tiny alignments, subtle signs, unexpected ease, not the forced coincidences of a mind still clinging, but the gentle response of a field finally unbound. The loop has ended, and reality begins to hum a new tone. And yet, this is only the first break. To fully step into the recalibrated field, you must understand coherence, how the scattered fragments of the brain unite when freed from stress, how clarity of intention transforms into signal. For once the loop is broken, the next step is alignment. The observer must not only stop repeating, but begin resonating. Emerging from the silence where the loop dissolved, you feel the subtle order of your awareness beginning to take shape. Freed from the echoes of repetition, the mind no longer scatters itself across problems, roles, and endless comparisons. Instead, something remarkable begins: coherence. The fragments of the brain, once divided by stress, gradually reunite, as though an invisible conductor lifts a baton and the orchestra tunes to a single key. This is the hidden architecture of the field at work within you. For when your observation no longer fuels the old cycle, energy that was once wasted in survival returns to its source. The left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, once arguing in quiet conflict, find harmony. Neural networks that were compartmentalized under pressure begin to reconnect. Instead of discordant notes clashing, you hear resonance clear, stable, and unified. Coherence is more than mental clarity. It is a vibrational event. The brain ceases to operate as isolated chambers and begins functioning as a single symphony. Imagine waveforms once scattered now overlapping, combining, and amplifying into something stronger. Small ripples interfere with one another to create a greater wave. The amplitude grows, the energy expands, and the field takes notice. For energy responds to order. A chaotic mind sends out a fractured signal, weak and easily lost in the noise. But a coherent mind broadcasts like a lighthouse cutting through fog. The more coherent the brain, the more direct the intention becomes, the clearer the signal that the field can recognize. Here you discover the true mechanics of creation, not through force, not through repetition of empty affirmations, but through resonance. Think of it like tuning a radio. When the dial is just off, you hear static. The song is there, but buried beneath noise. With coherence, the static falls away. The song emerges in perfect clarity. Your intention is that song, and coherence is the tuning. The clearer the frequency, the more powerfully the signal reaches into the invisible field. You can feel this shift within yourself. The scattered thoughts that once pulled you in a dozen directions settle into rhythm. Focus becomes effortless. The mind is no longer at war with itself, no longer bouncing from one memory to another, from one worry to another. Instead, it becomes whole. That wholeness is not just psychological, it is electromagnetic. It is a measurable shift in energy. And the moment the brain unites in coherence, something else awakens possibility. For in that alignment, the brain is not simply thinking about the future, it is broadcasting it. Every clear thought, every defined vision becomes an electric signal. The field, alive with potential, responds not to scattered whispers, but to unified symphony. And when it hears a coherent signal, it begins to rearrange probabilities. This is where the observer transforms into the creator. You are no longer a passive watcher, repeating the loop of yesterday. You are now a broadcaster, a transmitter of signal into the living vacuum. And the vacuum is not empty, it is pregnant with all timelines, all outcomes, waiting for the strongest resonance to collapse into reality. Coherence is not rigid control, it is living alignment. Just as an orchestra does not eliminate individuality but blends instruments into harmony, coherence does not erase thought, it refines it. You still carry preferences, visions, desires, but instead of being fragmented across contradictions, they align into a unified note. That note is what the field amplifies. And in the amplification, energy builds. Larger waves mean greater impact. The field does not ignore such resonance. It bends to it. The quantum responds not to willpower, but to coherence, not to effort, but to signal strength. Here, in the state of brain coherence, you realize that alignment is not an achievement, but a remembrance. The brain was designed to function as a whole. Stress merely scattered it. By stepping beyond the observer loop, you have given the brain permission to return to its natural state of unity. But coherence alone is not enough. Signal without magnetism is incomplete. Electricity must be paired with magnetism to create a full electromagnetic wave. And so, the next step rises naturally, the heart. For while the brain broadcasts the signal, it is the heart that pulls reality toward you. If the brain is the transmitter, the heart is the magnet. And only together do they form the resonance that can draw the future into the present. From the moment the brain finds coherence, a new pulse stirs deeper in your chest. You feel it not as thought, but as rhythm. While the mind may broadcast the signal, the heart is what draws the future to you. Electricity without magnetism is incomplete. It is the union of both that becomes a living wave strong enough to ripple across the field. The heart is not just metaphor, it is magnet. Science itself shows that the heart radiates a magnetic field, extending beyond the body, a sphere of influence that others can sense without words. This magnetic field is strongest when the heart is coherent, when it is not fractured by fear, judgment, or grief. Love, not sentimental but elemental, is the organizing principle of this coherence. Pure love is alignment with Source, the invisible force holding atoms together, the glue binding galaxies in motion. Picture your heart as an aurora, glowing like the northern lights when coherent. It shines in bands of luminous color, magnetic streams weaving through the invisible sky around you. Incoherence dims it. scattering the light in static bursts. But when you rest in love, real love, the aurora brightens, drawing reality toward you in effortless arcs. The heart magnet is not about forcing outcomes. It is about drawing resonance. A coherent heart is like gravity that bends space-time itself. The stronger the magnet, the more it pulls potentials from the field into proximity. The mind may point toward a vision, but the heart is what makes that vision inevitable. Think of how you once strained to chase after outcomes, jobs, relationships, recognition. Every effort to grasp was resistance, every chase a signal of lack. But the magnetic heart does not chase. It attracts. It does not strive. It draws. And what it draws is not random. It draws the futures that vibrate at the same frequency as its coherence. This is why the future must be paired with love. You cannot call in a possibility if your heart rejects it. You cannot magnetize abundance from a place of fear, nor call forth healing from a place of bitterness. The heart, when incoherent, pushes away what the mind tries to summon. The signals cross, and the field remains silent. But align the brain's clear signal with the heart's magnetic field, and reality itself bends toward you. Imagine it, your brain sends out the intention like a beacon of light, while your heart shapes the space around you like a cosmic lens. The beacon shines outward, and the lens draws inward. Together they collapse distance. Together they make the unseen visible, the potential actual. This union of brain and heart is not mystical alone, it is mechanical in the deepest sense. Electricity and magnetism are not two forces, but one, an electromagnetic wave. Your body, when coherent, is this wave in human form. You are no longer separated from the field. You are the field resonating consciously, deliberately, and love, pure love, is what makes it stable. Love unifies, love organizes, love draws all fragments into coherence. It is not weakness, nor softness in the way the world has taught you. Love is structure. Love is order. Love is the only frequency the field cannot resist. When you rest here in this union of mind's signal and heart's magnet, synchronicity accelerates. Life no longer feels like effort, but like orbit. You are not pushing against reality. You are curving it toward you. The future begins to circle nearer, drawn by the magnetic pull of coherence. But this is not the end of the path, it is only the foundation. For once you understand the mechanics of this electromagnetic self, the next step is to realize how to use it. Creation from the field. The mind-heart union is the instrument. What you play with it becomes the reality you live, flowing from the aurora of the heart. The next revelation arises: you are not here merely to witness coherence, but to create with it. The union of signal and magnetism becomes an instrument of manifestation, and the field itself responds as the great stage. The question is not whether you can create, but whether you will choose to create from matter or from the field. Creation from matter is slow, heavy, effortful. It is the realm of pushing objects against other objects, of chasing outcomes, of believing you must build everything brick by brick. It is the logic of 3-dimension, where time and space stand between you and the future you long for. And yet, this is how most live grinding in the visible, forgetting the invisible source that makes the visible possible. Creation from the field is altogether different. It does not move linearly, it collapses timelines. It does not depend on distance. It draws potentials near by resonance. It is not about what you do with your hands or how hard you push. It is about what you broadcast and what you magnetize. The brain becomes the transmitter. The heart becomes the magnet. And together, they call forth realities waiting as potentials in the field. Imagine a cosmic transmitter alive within you. Every thought, when coherent, sends out a clear pulse. Every emotion, when elevated, radiates like a magnetic wave. These pulses and waves intersect in the void, shimmering like interference patterns on the surface of water. Where they overlap, where coherence is strong, the field answers with alignment. The probability of that potential rises. The unseen becomes likely, and the likely becomes lived. This is why clarity matters. A fractured intention broadcasts a fractured signal. A heart split between hope and doubt pulls nothing consistently. But when clarity of vision fuses with the magnetism of love, a frequency emerges that the field cannot ignore. It is the sound of resonance. It is the hum of creation. You may recall moments when this happened by accident, when you wanted something not with desperation, but with ease, when you felt gratitude before it arrived, when you held no doubt, only quiet knowing. And then, without effort, the thing appeared. That was not coincidence. That was creation from the field. The practice is not about making the field obey you. It is about matching its rhythm. Think of a tuning fork. Strike one, and another nearby vibrates without being touched. Your coherent mind and coherent heart are the tuning fork. The potential reality is the second fork. When frequencies match, the second cannot help but vibrate. That is resonance. That is manifestation. And here lies the subtlety. It is not about wanting. Wanting signals lack. It is not about striving. Striving signals distance. It is about being, about embodying the state of already, about radiating gratitude as though the future had already arrived, because in the field it has. When you enter this state, mime itself bends. You are no longer waiting for the future to come to you. You are collapsing into the future that already exists in the field. The linear path dissolves. The circle of creation completes. Creation from the field is not fantasy. It is remembrance. You were designed to operate this way. Every mystic, every seer, every scientist who dared to step beyond the obvious has whispered the same truth. Reality is energy before it is matter, frequency before it is form. To create from the field is to work with the root rather than the shadow. And yet, even this is only part of the path. For as the brain and heart transmit, as the field responds, another phenomenon emerges: synchronicity. The outward signs that the invisible is becoming visible, the gentle alignments, the seemingly impossible coincidences that confirm you are bending into the new reality. This is where we must go next. For once you have begun creating from the field, you must learn to read the signs of the field, responding to recognize synchronicity not as chance, but as proof of resonance. As the transmitter of brain and heart plays in harmony, the field begins to whisper back. The whispers take form as synchronicities, subtle ripples across the surface of your days. At first, they appear as small alignments, a phrase you needed to hear arriving in a stranger's voice, an opportunity showing up the moment you surrendered, a door opening exactly where you thought there was only a wall. These are not accidents. They are signals that the invisible is starting to bend into visibility. Think of it like lightning across a night sky. One flash, then another, then a storm of illumination. Synchronicity is lightning in the fabric of probability. It reveals that currents are flowing, that unseen potentials are discharging into form. Each flash is a sign that your resonance is striking the vacuum, electrifying the void. But here is where many stumble. They treat synchronicity as novelty instead of navigation. They notice the spark, but dismiss the current. Synchronicity is not there to entertain you. It is there to guide you. Each alignment is a feedback signal from the field, showing that your frequency and a potential reality are vibrating in tune. When you begin creating from the field, You do not need to force the outcome. Instead, you learn to dance with these sparks. Every coincidence is confirmation. Every pattern is proof. The more you align your signal, the more the lightning gathers strength, until probability itself tilts in your favor. This is not superstition, it is physics of resonance. A coherent brain and a coherent heart send out waves. When those waves meet potentials vibrating at the same pitch, interference occurs, two signals overlapping into one stronger wave. That overlap is experienced as synchronicity. It is the moment when possibility collapses into probability. Consider how you once struggled to engineer every step of your path, controlling, calculating, exhausting yourself to make things happen. That was living as if you were separate from the field. But when synchronicity begins to flow, effort is replaced by rhythm. You no longer push, you align. You no longer chase, you allow. Life becomes less like climbing a mountain and more like gliding on a current. The field does not speak in words, it speaks in patterns. It arranges the improbable into your path, weaving signals into your ordinary moments. To see them requires presence, to trust them requires surrender, and to follow them requires courage, because synchronicity often leads where logic cannot. When you respond, the dance deepens, a sign leads to a step, the step leads to an opening, the opening to another sign, and before long, you are moving with the rhythm of reality itself. This is the electricity of manifestation, not raw force, but charged flow. You become both the conductor and the lightning, both the one who signals and the one who receives. And yet, synchronicity is not only about attracting futures, it is also about shedding the past. As new alignments appear, old patterns unravel. The betrayals, the delays, the losses, all the echoes of yesterday begin to lose their weight. You no longer interpret them as punishments, but as catalysts that carried you here. The past stops defining you because the future is proving itself in real time. This is the turning point when you no longer ask if the field works, because the evidence surrounds you. You see it in the conversations you stumble into, the opportunities that meet you halfway, the grace that arrives when logic says it should not. These moments accumulate until reality itself feels electric, charged with meaning, luminous with possibility. But there is a deeper truth beneath the sparks. Synchronicity is not the destination, it is the signpost. Beyond it lies the work of dissolving the deepest anchors of the past, the traumas and identities that keep your frequency tied to old timelines. To move fully into recalibration, you must allow the field not only to deliver futures, but to release the weight of what was. From the sparks of synchronicity, the field begins to shine a steady glow, and in that light you see something profound, the anchors of your past loosening. For as long as the observer loop held you, every memory was a chain, every wound a weight, every betrayal a tether tying your frequency to the same repeating timeline. But when the field responds with resonance, the gravity of the past begins to fade. You are no longer orbiting what was, you are recalibrating toward what can be. This is where the real alchemy unfolds, because synchronicities are not just proof of alignment, they are invitations to release. Each alignment whispers, you no longer need that story. You no longer need that wound. And as you follow the rhythm, old patterns rise to the surface, not to haunt you, but to be dissolved. Think of your past as code written into your nervous system, lines of programming shaped by experiences of pain, rejection, limitation. When you lived inside the loop, you kept running that code without question. But once resonance with the field begins, you realize you can rewrite it. The signals of synchronicity are like update prompts, reminding you that your operating system is not fixed. You are not condemned to recycle trauma into tomorrow. Releasing the past is not denial, it is recalibration. It is seeing clearly that what once defined you no longer holds charge. The memory remains, but the magnetism dissolves. The old betrayal becomes neutral. The old failure loses its sting. You look back and find not bitterness, but gratitude, because every weight carried you to the point where you could finally let go. This is observer neutrality, the state where you can witness your story without becoming it. The brain no longer floods with stress hormones at the memory. The heart no longer contracts at the thought of a name or a place. Instead, you look upon it like stars already burned out. Their light may still travel, but their fire has gone. And here is the paradox: when you dissolve the anchors of the past, time itself begins to rearrange. The timeline you thought inevitable rewrites itself. What once seemed destined, the cycle of repeating patterns, the shadow of generational wounds, suddenly collapses. In its place, new coordinates appear, pointing you toward futures untouched by what was. Imagine standing before a vast constellation. At first, the stars form the same pattern you've seen for years. But as you release, the stars shift. A new constellation emerges, guiding you in a direction you never thought possible. This is the recalibration of reality itself. By dissolving the anchors, you give the field permission to redraw your sky. The process is not always gentle. Sometimes the field will place before you the very memories you thought buried, the very faces you thought forgotten, not to punish, but to free. When they surface, you are given a choice: fall back into the loop of reaction, or step into neutrality and let the charge dissolve. Every choice is a recalibration. Every moment of neutrality is a rewriting of the code. You may feel the release in your body, tension melting from places that carried pain for years, breath deepening where it once caught, sleep softening where it once fractured. This is not imagination. It is physiology responding to freedom. When the past no longer commands your energy, the body begins to heal in the rhythm of coherence. And as the anchors dissolve, something extraordinary happens. Your future stops being compensation for your past. You no longer seek success to heal old wounds, no longer crave love to mend old absence, no longer strive for recognition to erase old rejection. Instead, you create because you are source, not to fix, but to express, not to prove, but to expand. This is the heart of timeline recalibration. You are no longer chained to yesterday's loops. You are stepping into futures that exist not as reactions, but as creations. The code has been rewritten. The constellation has shifted. The field is waiting for the next signal, and you are free to broadcast without the weight of what was. As the constellation of your own past dissolves and the code of your story rewrites, something wider awakens the realization that your recalibration does not exist in isolation. Each coherent signal you broadcast ripples outward, brushing against the invisible membranes of collective consciousness. What you once thought of as just personal is, in truth, a contribution to the entire field. Think of yourself as a single note within a vast oceanic symphony. When that note is fractured, it introduces dissonance. But when it is clear and coherent, it strengthens the harmony of the whole. The heart's magnetic field is not limited to your skin, it radiates meters beyond you. Multiply that by millions of people, each heart, each brain resonating in its own rhythm, and the ocean of collective reality begins to take shape. When one note shifts, the entire song adjusts. This is why your work of coherence matters. When you withdraw from the observer loop, when you dissolve your anchors, you are not only freeing yourself, you are altering the resonance dome of humanity. Others may not see it, but they feel it. They feel it in sudden ease, in inexplicable relief, in the subtle invitation to soften their own hearts. Picture it like waves colliding in an ocean. A single ripple may seem insignificant, but when joined with countless others, a tide is born. That tide can carry entire ships, shift entire shores. In the same way, the field responds not just to the signal of one individual, but to the harmony of many. Coherence multiplies. Wholeness resonates. History itself shows how consciousness clusters. Movements have emerged not because everyone agreed logically, but because hearts synchronized beneath the surface. A wave of coherence swept through, and suddenly, impossible shifts became inevitable. Collective fields recalibrated, and with them, entire worlds. And here you stand, realizing that your alignment contributes to such tides. Your coherent brain, your magnetic heart, are not private events. They are electric flares in the collective field. You are touching others without touching them, influencing without controlling, transmitting without words. This is not mysticism. It is physics of resonance on a global scale. Consider how a stadium erupts when thousands chant in unison. The sound is not just louder, it is transformative. It enters the body, rattles the bones, unites strangers into a single force. Now imagine that same principle, but with invisible energy, with coherence itself as the chant. You are adding your voice to that unseen stadium. Yet, with this realization comes responsibility. What signal are you broadcasting into the shared field? Are you feeding fear, scarcity, and division? Or are you radiating coherence, love, and possibility? Every thought and emotion ripples beyond you, shaping the resonance dome of humanity. You are not only creating your future, you are tilting the probability of futures for all. This is why neutrality is powerful. When you release the anchors of your past, you stop broadcasting old wounds into the collective. You stop amplifying patterns of survival and separation. Instead, you become a stabilizer, a node of coherence in the vast network of minds and hearts. Like a lighthouse, you do not force ships to change course, but your presence makes new directions visible. And in this awareness, something humbling unfolds. Your personal liberation becomes an offering. You realize that the very act of stepping into source identity is not selfish, but generous. For each time you lift into coherence, you help others feel that it is possible. You become evidence that the field can change. Proof that reality can recalibrate. The ocean of humanity is stirred by tides, both seen and unseen. Wars, media, crises all ripple through the field. But so too does love, intention, and coherence. And when enough hearts align, the resonance dome shifts. What was once improbable becomes inevitable. What was once hidden becomes obvious. What was once distant becomes here. And so, the path widens. You began by breaking the observer loop. You stepped into coherence of brain and heart. You learned to create from the field and to dissolve the past. Now you see that all of it was never just for you. It was to realize that you are a node in the greater network of consciousness, and that the field itself is recalibrated through you. But even this collective resonance is not the end. Beyond it lies something even more subtle, even more mysterious, the state of lingering in nothingness itself, where personal and collective dissolve, and only source awareness remains. That is where the deepest transformations are seated. Crossing from the tide of the collective, you arrive again at the threshold of the void. This time, it does not feel like emptiness, but like the purest fullness potential without shape, presence without identity. To linger in nothingness is to encounter the place where all fields converge, where even the resonance of the collective dissolves into the silence of source. Here, there are no names, No past, no body, no future awaiting. There is only a shimmering stillness, alive yet unformed. It is the paradox that unsettles the material mind, that what looks like nothing is the womb of everything. The vacuum is not empty, it vibrates. It hums with frequencies too subtle for the senses, carrying within them the blueprint of all possible realities. When you settle into this space, you are not meditating on something, you are melting into the nothing. The boundaries of yourself thin out. The edges of identity blur. You are not the thinker observing thought, nor the body observing sensation. You are the awareness itself, vast, centerless, endless. Think of a drop dissolving into the ocean. The drop does not vanish, it becomes the ocean. In the same way, when you linger here, you dissolve as a separate self and awaken as the whole. The observer loop no longer exists, because there is no observer and no observed. There is only awareness aware of itself. And in this nothingness, something miraculous happens. Intention becomes pure, freed from the noise of identity. Your thought is no longer tangled with survival, with fear, with doubt. It is signal in its rawest form, a whisper from source to source. The field hears it not as request, but as recognition. And recognition is what collapses potentials into being. This state is the true seat of creation, not when you are desperately trying to manifest, not when you are bargaining with the universe, but when you are nothing, broadcasting from wholeness. Here, desire is not a plea, it is a frequency. Love is not emotion, it is the pulse of the field itself. The ancients spoke of this as the void, the great mystery, the womb of the cosmos. Quantum science gestures at it as the zero-point field, the vacuum energy that pervades all space. Mystics and physicists alike point to the same truth. The nothing is alive. It is not absence, but presence so vast it cannot be grasped. The practice is not to escape into this nothing, but to linger long enough for it to recalibrate you. Your brain synchronizes to the quiet, firing in harmony instead of fragmentation. Your heart expands, radiating coherence without effort. Your body feels lighter, as though its density has thinned. You emerge changed, because the nothing imprints itself into your very biology. And when you return, you bring the void with you. You walk into the world not as a seeker, but as source in motion. Daily reality may look the same: streets, faces, clocks ticking, but you perceive the hologram for what it is, a projection resting on an invisible canvas. You move with less fear, less urgency, because you have touched the backdrop that cannot be erased. Lingering in nothingness does not mean abandoning life. It means anchoring life in its true foundation. Every choice you make, every word you speak, every step you take becomes infused with the spaciousness of the void. You no longer cling to outcomes, because you know the field bends to coherence. You no longer fear loss, because you have touched what cannot be taken. This is the advanced state, living as both drop and ocean, both form and formless. You remember that you are the source, broadcasting not from effort but from being. And from here, the next movement arises naturally: integration, to walk as source in the everyday, to live coherence not just in meditation, but in traffic, in conversations, in the fabric of ordinary days. From the stillness of the void, you return carrying its silence like an unseen garment. And now comes the true test. Can you walk as source in the midst of the ordinary? Can you live coherence not only in the sanctuary of meditation, but in the unpredictable theater of daily life? Because the hologram does not vanish. The bills still arrive, the body still ages, the world still spins with its news, its noise, its endless distractions. But the difference is profound. You are no longer hypnotized by the stage. You see the light behind the projection, the field beneath the matter. You walk through the hologram with the awareness that it bends, responds, and reorganizes around the signal you broadcast. Living as Source is not about escaping life. It is about inhabiting it differently. You speak, but words carry coherence. You work, but your labor is not strain, it is expression. You love, but not from need, rather from overflow. The same actions remain, but the energy that drives them has shifted. It is no longer survival, but creation. Think of it as walking through a dream while lucid. The dream has shape, form, and consequence, but you know it is dreamlike, pliable, influenced by the energy you hold. With this knowing, fear lessens, urgency softens. You move through life not as a character desperate to control, but as awareness guiding a story. Integration means remembering the void even while standing in the marketplace. It means holding neutrality even while facing conflict. It means radiating coherence in the presence of chaos. This is not perfection, it is practice. Some days the hologram feels heavy, and the old loops tempt you back. But each time you pause, each time you breathe, each time you return to awareness, you are recalibrating reality again. Walking as Source also means becoming compass more than traveler. Instead of chasing timelines, you allow timelines to bend toward you. Your heart acts as north, your brain as signal. Together they guide you not with maps of certainty, but with magnetic pull. You know when something is aligned not because logic convinces you, but because the field resonates. You feel the hum in your chest, the clarity in your mind. That is your yes. And when life surprises you with storms, you respond differently. Where once you resisted, now you listen. Where once you panicked, now you recalibrate. Even difficulty becomes dialogue with the field. Another chance to refine your frequency. Another invitation to embody coherence. You learn that walking as Source does not mean avoiding contrast. It means meeting contrast with neutrality and letting it dissolve into new creation. Over time, this way of living becomes effortless. You stop thinking of yourself as someone trying to manifest and simply live as one who is aligned. You notice synchronicities not with astonishment, but with gratitude. You no longer seek proof because you know the field responds. Your very presence becomes proof for yourself and for those around you. And here lies the quiet beauty. Integration is contagious. Just as incoherence spreads, so too does coherence. By walking as Source in ordinary spaces on a crowded street, in a tense conversation, in the small rituals of your day, you transmit an unspoken signal. Others may not know why they feel calmer, why possibilities appear, why they sense hope again, but they will feel it. You become living evidence of the field's responsiveness. To live this way is to honor both sides of your being, the infinite and the finite, the Source and the self. You no longer choose between the void and the world, between meditation and motion. You carry the void within the world, the silence within the sound, the field within the form. That is the final recalibration, not retreat, but embodiment. So the path comes full circle, from breaking the observer loop to dissolving the anchors of the past, to radiating coherence into the collective, to touching nothingness itself. Every step has prepared you for this, to walk awake inside the hologram as Source remembering itself. The circle closes, yet the resonance continues. You have walked through the observer loop, dissolved the weight of the past, touched the silence of the void, and returned carrying its frequency into the ordinary world. Now the task is not to do more, but to be simply, steadily, coherently. Walking as Source is not a performance. It is not about appearing enlightened or crafting a perfect life. It is about subtle presence, about remembering the field even when no one else speaks of it, about carrying coherence in the small moments when you wait in line, when you speak to a stranger, when you breathe before responding to someone you love. These are the places where reality quietly recalibrates. You may be tempted to think the transformation requires grand gestures, but the field does not measure scale, it measures frequency. A single breath in coherence radiates farther than 1,000 actions in panic. A single moment of gratitude can tilt probabilities in ways you may never fully trace. And so, let this be your invitation. Allow life to become your practice. Not only when you sit in silence, but when you move through noise. Not only when you touch the void, but when you carry groceries, answer emails, or watch the sun set. Each moment is another chance to broadcast coherence, to magnetize futures, to contribute to the resonance dome of all humanity. The void is still within you. The field is still listening, and the heart is still glowing, sending its aurora outward. Let yourself rest in that knowing. Let yourself trust that the recalibration has already begun, and that it continues with every signal you send, every thought you align, every act you embody. Because the truth is simple. Though vast, you are not waiting for reality to change. You are the change. You are source in motion, coherence walking, love magnetizing, and the field is already responding.